Hi, I'm going to read a little excerpt from my sample translation of Blade of Hearts or Das Herzflorett by Marica Bodrožić. As much as Pepsi loves the quiet of the village, she longs for people. She wants to get away from her relatives in sleepy Herzegovina, where she's treated like an orphan and gets scarcely enough to eat, sometimes nothing at all. And she wants to get away from her grandfather's farm, away from the Dalmatian south. She wants to go to the European north and eat her fill of something delicious at last, not just snack on someone else's leftovers. To her, life with her faraway parents is something precious. They live in Hessen, an area in the north, in Germany. That's what they told her. Once Pepsi learns the alphabet at school, she practices every day. She has only one thought in her head, a request that feels urgent to her. Just after her 9th birthday, she's ready. She asks her Aunt Rosa at the other end of the village for her parents' address. She writes them a long letter. "I'm starving here. No one gives me anything," she starts it off. "You just have to come and get me and my brother and sister. We should all be living together." Just after they were born, when they were 8 or 10 weeks old, Pepsi, her sister and her brother were left with relatives. Her mother would come back to the south from Hessen for the births. She'd have her babies and go back up north as soon as possible so she wouldn't lose her job. From one visit to the next, Pepsi always forgot what her mother looked like. All she could remember was her long velvety black hair, the hair her father had instantly fallen for when he spotted her in a church in Hessen as the Lord's Prayer was being recited. They married soon after, and every year they'd think that this year would be a good year to return south. But that longed-for good year never came, and Pepsi only knew them as people who came to visit, each time bringing with them a new illness, a new ailment, a new fear of dying. The borer blew fiercely as she walked through the overgrown gardens and took the letter, like a future already promised to her, to the postman. Her hair flew up in the air for a moment as if time were standing still, holding that blink of an eye firmly inside her, hinting at something in the future that already knew of her and awaited her, just in that little pause, without telling her anything more. Something fundamental was about to change for her. She could feel it, and a slight foreboding rose in her, a distant sense of something strange that felt both terrible and beautiful. Pepsi had written it almost without pausing for breath, that letter which would change everything. She'd triumphantly sealed the envelope with her spit, and then gone into the village to the postman's house, determined and driven by an inner force that was new to her, a force she wanted to follow at all costs. On the path, lined with unkempt, wildly fragrant herbs, she'd sung an old Italian song to herself, her favourite song of all, which she'd often heard on Radio Split, and which she'd hurriedly taped with an ancient cassette recorder, missing the first few lines in her excitement. She listened to it over and over as she lay on her back in the meadow back then, chewing on a long blade of grass like a sweet, in a childhood where learning and living were one and the same, and she was a deer in the void of life, a letter in the alphabet of the meadow of reasons, a rose chafer in the warm southern air. And later, when they all moved to a little town in Hessen in the north and left the south behind forever, granting the wish she'd expressed in her letter, Pepsi thought the sky of her childhood always had 4 faces, and the other 2, west and east, were now missing. Leaving had robbed her of her grassy lookout, her green compass, which now realigned inside her and guided them all to a new and very different life together. Thank you.